All right, I'd like to call our regular board meeting to order at this point and begin by acknowledging that the Langley School District resides on the traditional territories of the Kwantlen, Keetsi, and Matsqui and Simiamu First Nations, and also state that the Policy 1204 bylaws of the board, this regular board meeting of the Board of Education will be recorded and may be streamed live, archived, and accessed online. The board also reserves the right to edit or by motion of the board at any meeting choose not to stream live or archive a meeting or portion thereof. And now I'd like to begin with introductions, and on my far left is Trustee Shelley Coburn. Next to her, Trustee Rod Ross. Then Trustee Rosemary Wallace. Our Secretary-Treasurer, Brian Isley. I'm Rob McFarland, Chair of the Board of Education. To my right is Superintendent of Schools, Gord Stewart. Our Vice Chair, Megan Dykeman. Trustee Allison McVeigh. And Trustee David Todd. From our partner groups, we've got Charla Major and Marnie Wilson from QP 1260. Wendy Cook and Gurpreet Mahil from the LTA. Suzanne Perot from DPAC. And Calvin Leung from the Langley Principals and Vice Principals Association. From our district leadership team, we have Shin Chan, our Assistant Secretary Treasurer. Woody's not there. Amal Gill, Assistant Superintendent. Barry Bunyan, Director of Human Resources. Lori Mason, our Executive Assistant for the board. And Ken Hoff, our Communications Manager. And now I'd like to begin with a report from in-camera. Vice Chair Dykeman.
In camera, we discussed personnel, property, and legal.
Thank you. Now, can we get a motion the Board of Education adopt the consent agenda items as provided? Moved by Trustee Ross, seconded by Trustee Dykeman. Any comments or questions on the consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? And that brings us to consideration of the agenda. Could we have a motion that the agenda be approved as presented? Moved by Trustee Todd, seconded Trustee Dykeman. Any comments, questions on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that brings us to presentations and the 2018 Pyeongchang Olympic Winter Games student reporter, Kevin Lee. Yeah. Oh. First off, sorry for getting your name wrong. It's written down differently here.
Hello, my name of 2018, I was assigned by Procter & Gamble to film and photograph the Pyeongchang. And today I'm just going to be talking about a little bit about what I did there, basically. So what you may be...
I'm getting there. Okay. Well, as soon as you turn it on for me, because I always forget.
So you're probably wondering,
No. Not on? No? So for you, well, mine's on apparently, so. Yes, I did press a button.
Marty, that's it.
We're not streaming this, right?
You got it.
Okay, there you go.
all right, thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. Yeah, so today I'm just going to be talking about what I did there. And the first thing you're probably all wondering is, how did I obtain this opportunity? You know, I'm just a high school student, and you've probably never even heard of me before this happened. And there's three major factors that really contributed. Was number one, my family and my network. Basically, except for my mom and I, who live in Langley, the rest of my family lives in Korea. And they know that I do filmmaking, and to support me, what they do is they try to create connections for me with businesses that they know. For example, my dad has worked with P&G in the past, and so what he did was he told them that he has a son, you know, me, in Canada who's good at filmmaking, and that they should contact me if they ever need some filmmaking work done. But actually, they never really contacted me first, but I'll get to that later. And secondly, I have a very extensive portfolio and a resume. I've won multiple awards in filmmaking in a provincial, national, and an international level. In fact, last year, I was here in the same place, and I was given an award from Workspace BC. And I'm also bilingual. I can speak Korean and English very fluently, and so I believe they thought that, you know, having someone that can speak both languages in such a diverse and an international event would be very useful to them. And as you can see in the image, that's me just testing out my camera. And so, yeah, they never really contacted me first. So what I had to do was I had to pitch an idea to them, to something that they would hopefully like and something that would give me an opportunity to work with them. So what I did was I came up with an idea with the help of my dad, and we said that we should create a video, like a documentary sort of video, basically showcasing all the sponsored events that P&G was doing for the Olympics, and just promoting it to their consumers. And they actually liked it. They said sure, and they gave me the job. But there are pros and cons to everything. And so, to talk about the pros first. First, I was paid. You know, I was given $5,000, which paid for both me and my mom to go to Korea and stay there for 2 weeks and be at the Olympics. And you know, this was my first time being at the Olympics at all. Like, I moved to Vancouver almost a week after the Winter Olympics ended, so I never got to experience it before, which was amazing. And this was my first time seeing my family members in almost 4 or 5 years, which was incredible. And being able to say that, yeah, I earned this trip, I paid for this trip myself, was something I was very proud of myself for. And lastly, this was a really good opportunity for my resume and my future portfolio, because, you know, there's not a lot of high school students that can say they got to film at the Olympics for Procter & Gamble. But there was one major con, which was that this whole event was nothing like what I expected. And to elaborate, well, first of all, I was not put in charge of this project. In fact, I was put into a team of professional Korean filmmakers. And also, they decided to completely change my idea around. So originally, I wanted to create a video for the consumers, just a simple little video to show that P&G sponsored the Olympics. But what P&G wanted was that they wanted to create a video that basically showed their upper heads at the corporate company that how they were using their sponsorship with the Olympics to grow their market and reach a bigger target, which was something that I was not prepared for. And so what that meant was, you know, what I had imagined was that I would be filming some regular, just the crowd, maybe some of the sponsored athletes. You know, I didn't expect that they would put me in front of the president of the whole Olympic committee in front of me, next to the CEO of eBay and the CEO of P&G, to, you know, film and photograph. That was not something that I had expected, and it was quite intimidating. And they've also, instead of putting me in stadiums, which what I was expecting, they've placed me in a multiple VIP events. So they sent me to this huge dinner party where everyone was like
dressed in very rich, formal outfits, and everyone was eating like these fancy foods that I didn't even know the names of, and it was just it was not what I had imagined at all. And overall, it was quite terrifying. But I definitely loved it, and they gave me some very strict rules. I was told not to get in their way. I was told not to speak to them like at all, and they told me not to be noticed by them. So literally for almost a week, all from 9 to 5, I was carrying around these heavy camera equipment, walking around like a paparazzi, just trying to take photos and videos of these celebrities without getting noticed by them, and and it was quite difficult because they always had security around them, so I always had to try to walk around security to get the shot I wanted. But overall, we were able to pull it through, and they were very strict about what I could and could not show around, but they did say that I could show 40 seconds of the final video, not the final video, one of the rough edits of the video. And so here it is. Okay, okay, sorry about that. Yeah, but I did also get to take a lot of like personal photography for my own portfolio. For example, I got to watch the curling match, the semifinals, where the Canadian team actually competed in. I think they lost actually. They came in 4th overall, but it was it was really fun to watch. And I also had about a week of free time where I just got to explore Korea for the first time in almost 5 years and just take whatever photos and videos I wanted. And it's quite interesting actually, because almost 4 years ago when I first came to Walnut Grove, I never intended on becoming a filmmaker. I actually wanted to be a programmer. And I was a quite dedicated student actually. Ever since starting in grade 8, I actually planned out my past 4 years in high school. I planned out what courses I was going to take, what summer school classes I was going to do, what universities I wanted to apply to. And I thought I had my whole life figured out. But I made a mistake in grade 9. And there's this really great quote from Albert Einstein that really fits what happened to me. And he said, "A person who never made a mistake never tried anything new." And basically, in grade 9, I wanted to take computer apps, which basically shows you the introductory level programming in our school. But I accidentally took computer graphics instead. And in that graphics course, I wanted to switch out. But they told me if I wanted to switch out, I'd have to switch my whole timetable around, and I didn't want that. So I just thought I'd try it for a year. And to be honest, I did not enjoy it at all in the beginning. I never had any interest in art or computer graphics in my life. And I thought I would just skim through it as quickly as possible. But a few months passed by, and I kept trying these new stuff, and I started to open up a bit. And I actually kind of turned out that I was starting to enjoy it. And then I got to make my first short film, which, to be honest, was awful, but I loved the process of doing it. And by the time I was finished with grade 9, I was entering grade 10, I decided to throw out my whole plan, and I did a full 180 and decided to go into filmmaking. And 2 years later, here I am now. And I am, and like no one told me to say this, like Mr. Morty didn't tell me to say this either, but I am genuinely very thankful from the bottom of my heart for my school to have such diverse amount of programs to let me try out these new things. And I honestly don't know where I would be if I didn't have such an opportunity. So, thank you all for supporting my school, supporting the students, and yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Before some of you are going to take, really how amazing he is. He just him along with Ethan Eigenfeld are like the two film opportunity to work with them. And they dragged me into Fort Langley on a Saturday at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I was picking. So I mean, all these things that you kind of cringe at, but they cringe. And a few months later, they won, I think, Vancouver Film School. Yeah. They won the provincial film contest. These are two kids that are always creating. Once in a while, you'll see Kevin almost falling asleep as he's editing. One of those special, dedicated kids. And we talk about the new curriculum and everything about finding your passion. It's right here. Wonderful.
Well, congratulations and thank you for sharing your story. It's amazing how as you work through life, you know, you learn so much by mistakes and surprises and adversity when you think you're going to do one thing and you end up doing something completely different. So, Trustee Todd?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Thank you for taking the road less traveled and trying on something new. And that's ultimately inspiring, because that's what we always ask people to do. And you're try something new tomorrow too.
All right, thank you.
Trustee Wallace.
Thank you for your presentation, and thanks for inspiring us this evening. I believe your film was showed at the Langley School Foundation Film Festival.
Yeah, it was.
And I was blown away. So, amongst a whole bunch of other people, it was so well done. So congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Trustee McVeigh.
Thank you. I just want to say I love your story. It's a great story. Thank you for sharing it. I gather you're graduating this year?
Yes.
What are your plans?
I'm hoping to go to SFU, but I haven't been accepted yet. So.
SFU?
I haven't been accepted yet, so okay. I'm still waiting.
To study filmmaking?
Yeah, filmmaking.
Yeah. Good for you. Well, best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing your story and congratulations, and I hope we hear more of as you move forward at SFU. Thanks. And that brings us to delegations. Wendy Cook, on behalf of the New Westminster District Labour Council, on the day of mourning for workers killed and injured.
Is it okay if I stand over there instead? The reason I stand there is because I just don't like to have my back to anybody. Is that okay? I don't like that thing very much. But if you want me there, Ken, I'll go there. Okay. Oh, the reprimand, right?
We are recorded, so you do need to be using the mic.
Oh,
be heard. So you're on the record.
Have to use them. How do you use this thing? Is it on? Oh, it's on. Okay. First of all, I'll quickly explain that the PowerPoint is not mine, so there'll be a few, things in the PowerPoint that are just images that the New West District Labour Council put together. So as you click through, it doesn't really matter when the clicking happens, and I think Gert might do the clicking instead of me. I'm going to start a little differently than the New West District Labour Council wanted us to start, because this is about telling you that between 2012 and 2016, more than 32,000 young workers aged 15 to 24 were injured on the job in British Columbia. Of those, more than 3,600 were injured seriously, an average of 14 per week. From 2012 to 2015, the overall young worker injury rate decreased slightly. That said, 18 young workers in British Columbia died due to a workplace injury between 2012 and 2016. In Langley, the following secondary schools are participating in the Day of Mourning of BC Schools Project. And one of the reasons I'm mentioning this is at the BCTF AGM, it was one of our delegates who stood up and said, really, we should get individuals involved and schools involved in the project. And the following schools are in the project are Walnut Grove, Aldergrove Secondary, DW Poppy, Langley Fundamental Middle, Langley Secondary, and Brookswood. And it was one of the highest participation rates for secondary schools throughout BC. So here goes their presentation. Good evening. My name is Wendy Cook, and I'm a delegate of the New West District Labour Council. Each year, the New Westminster and District Labour Council presents to school boards and city councils within our region to seek their support and recognition of April 28th as the day of mourning for workers killed and injured on the job. Education is a key to prevention, and unions are leading the way. The BC Federation of Labour's Health and Safety Centre has evolved into a centre of excellence for occupational health and safety training and education. The center's programming is open to everyone, regardless of their current work status, including students and employers. The center has helped thousands of workers, organizations, and companies know their rights and their responsibilities for workplace safety. This year, the BC Labour Heritage Centre has partnered with the BC Teachers Federation, QPBC, the BC Federation of Labour, the BC Principals and Vice Principals Association, BC School Trustees Association, and WorkSafe BC to actively engage more schools to participate in the Day of Mourning BC Schools project. Many students and young people don't know the dangers they may face at work and their rights as workers. As a consequence, young workers are the most vulnerable group in the workforce, and they are statistically more likely to suffer injury or death in the workplace. Workers in BC can enter the workplace as young as 12 years of age. In BC, an average of 27 young workers have time loss injuries every day. Every week, 7 young workers are permanently disabled in BC. The BC Labour Heritage Centre provides resources to schools and teachers to promote student awareness of their rights to a safe workplace and to help them understand the importance of the Day of Mourning and the importance of honoring workers killed or seriously injured on the job. And actually, if Gerp has some handouts that he's already given or they've been done. Thanks. The specific goal of the project is to reduce the number of deaths and injuries among young workers. This year, we are highlighting the issue of workplace violence and harassment. The Canadian Labour Congress has launched a campaign called Violence and Harassment, Not Part of the Job, to bring awareness to the fact that many workers are at risk of violence in their workplaces, and all workers, regardless of workplace, sector, or industry, can suffer bullying and harassment at work from employers, clients, customers, or co-workers. Education and prevention are critical to identifying and reducing the risk of violence in the workplace. Violence prevention programs must be developed and implemented as part of the overall workplace health and safety program in workplaces where risks of violence are identified. Teachers, healthcare workers, first responders, public service and government employees, customer service agents, and those who work alone are all examples of workers who are vulnerable to violence from the public in their workplaces. Employers, workers, and unions all have a role to play in coming together to make workplaces safe and free from violence. Bullying and harassment are also being recognized as significant factors for injury to workers. More and more people are speaking out about the importance of mental health at home, at school, and at work. Bullying and harassment in the workplace can take many forms, including verbal aggression, personal attacks, and other actions designed to intimidate or humiliate. If workplace bullying and harassment is not addressed, it can lead to lost productivity, anxiety, and depression, and these effects can be felt by our families and our communities. Bullying and harassment are recognized by WorkSafe BC as workplace injuries. We all must ensure procedures are in place to respond to complaints, to address incidents, and ensure future bullying and harassment is prevented or minimized. Mental health and safety are as important as physical health and safety for workers on the job, and injuries can be every bit as debilitating. It is critically important that violence, bullying, and harassment in the workplace are all addressed through prevention, education, and positive actions. Workplace death and serious injuries and diseases do not discriminate, nor are they random and without cause. In 2016, 144 workers in BC died from a work-related injury or illness. By working together, we can all ensure workers stay safe and all our communities are healthy and strong. School board support for the day of mourning is a building block of this important work. Everyone here today can help us make a difference, be safety conscious, support accountability measures, and health and safety education in your workplaces and in our schools. As you have seen on our slides, and I don't know if you have seen on our slides because I wasn't watching, but union leaders and members, government leaders and employers gather together April 28th to mark this important day for workers. I invite you to join us Saturday, April 28th at 11 a.m. at Pier Park in New Westminster to commemorate the day of mourning for workers killed and injured on the job. Thank you. Respectfully presented by the New Westminster and District Labor Council. And just so you know, we do know that we have a lot of things in place already, and I'm in our district, and we do have a lot of schools who are on board, and so we do appreciate all of that also. Oh, and GERB's taking pictures because they asked him to take pictures so they could send it to New West District Labor Council so they knew we actually did this. Okay. Any questions?
Just thank you, Wendy. That is great. Couldn't agree more that young workers are definitely the most vulnerable, and we've all got a role to play. Education, prevention, it's the only way to get it done. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
That brings us to the superintendent's report and the framework for enhanced student learning and quality learning. Mr. Stewart.
Okay, I gotta ask, so I should put on my little mic here. We'll ask Bolin Worthy, principal of Walnut Grove Secondary, to come forward, and he's going to be presenting on the Human Dignity Coalition. And Bolin has certainly been, within our district, a real champion for inclusion. And working with a number of other individuals, has created a framework and an organization committee that is trying to draw more awareness in terms of issues around inclusion, barriers to inclusion, and how we can remove those, and looking to share some information with trustees tonight and the public in terms of their work to date, and request some things that they would love to see us being able to do going forward. So on that note, I'll turn it over to Principal Worthy.
Thank you. You can all hear me, I think? Good, thank you. I think it's so appropriate that Kevin actually did his presentation before us. Here we have a student, an international student, coming to Walnut Grove Secondary School, a school, or Langley, a community that doesn't have the level of diversity as some of the other communities in British Columbia, and he talked about the power of having an inclusive environment to pursue his hopes and dreams. So when we work together to represent the diversity of the community while promoting and advancing the principles of human dignity, equality, and inclusion for all members of our society, we think of students not only like Kevin, but members of our Indigenous community, members of our community that are fighting hard to be accepted because of being diagnosed with special needs, members of our community that may be older, members of our community that are experiencing poverty. Really, what we are is an organization that fights for the dignity of all individuals, and we feel we fit very well with the Langley School District. Now, as Barry puts this together, and he's going to have to go and find the link for us, one of the things we've done is we've done a number of forums already. And we talk about the power of understanding how diverse we are as human beings and how many misconceptions we have, particularly when it comes to identifying where do we come from and what race do we identify with. And so I'd ask you to take a look at this video. Some of you have seen it before.
I'm proud to be English. My family have served and we've defended this country and we've been to war for this country.
I'm really patriotic about Bangladesh.
Well, I am 100% Icelandic, yeah, definitely.
This is a Kurdish wedding with my mom in the traditional Kurdish clothes.
We're just proud black, so that's it.
Yeah, I think we are probably the best country in the world, if I'm honest.
Think about other countries and other nationalities in the world. Are there any that you don't feel you get on with well, or you won't like particularly?
Germany. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the Germans.
You might think they're a little bit...
Particularly India and Pakistan, probably, because of the whole, the conflict.
Because I have this side of me that's like, that hates Turkish people. Not people, but the government.
But French?
No. We're just the best, it's just fact.
I'm more important than you. I don't know you, but in my opinion, I am strong and I am more important than a lot of people.
How would you feel about taking a journey based on your DNA?
Yeah, I feel very intrigued.
What could you possibly tell me that I don't know?
So do you know how DNA works? So you get half from mum and half from dad, so 50% from each of them, and they get 50% from their parents, and back and back and back. And all those little bits of your ancestor, they filter down to make you, you. I need you to spit in this tube for me. You spit up to the little black line.
That's a lot of spit.
Right, the story of you is in the tube. What's it going to tell me?
It's going to be, oh yeah, you're French, and wait, your grandparents are French, and wait.
100% Bengali.
Solid Iraqi.
I'm Cuban.
You're going to tell me that I'm English, like I've told you.
Jay, can you come down and join us?
I'm a little bit nervous, I have to say.
So you ready to find out your results? Will you read it out to us, please?
Wow, look at me. Oh my God. Oh, wow. Shit, I didn't expect that.
All of them.
Whoa! No.
Caucasus, which was Turkish?
Yeah.
Eastern Europe, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece.
I'm 32% British.
What? Great Britain, 30%. Can we 5% German?
I'm Irish.
Yeah.
So I'm a Muslim Jew.
Great Britain, 11%. Are you sure these results are mine?
Eastern Europe?
Iceland has definitely moved closer to Europe now.
I'm going to go a bit far right now, but this should be compulsory. There would be no such thing as like extremism in the world if people knew their heritage like that. Like, who would be stupid enough to think of such thing as like a pure race?
In a way, we're all kind of cousins, in a broad sense. In a much more direct sense, you have a cousin in this room. Turn around and guess who it is. Wash?
Yeah. What's that?
Why don't you come down here and meet your cousin?
God, this is the best.
Did you know that?
I didn't know I did. This is like, my heart's pounding right now, I swear to God. We met.
I'm Jay from everywhere, whatever it is.
I'm a real man of the world.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you. So would you like to travel to all of these places?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Couple of points. One of the lines that came up was that we have more in common with the world than you think, and I think that's in essence what we want to teach all of our children, right? Another little side note that you may find of interest is my wife and I just actually did this test, and partly because we have adoptions from both sides, mine from one of my grandparents and my mother or my wife from her father. So we came back and the results were really quite intriguing. And I encourage you to take a look at this test sometime and to find out how diverse your background really is. I'm going to continue on with our presentation. Just to tell you a little bit about who we are. We're a network of individuals here that really represent the diversity of the community. We believe in human dignity and equality, and that's accomplished through community assessment, education, and public awareness. And some of the faces you might see on our executive may actually surprise you. We've been working with the Abbotsford Community Services, who started this organization. I'm part of the Fraser Valley Human Dignity Coalition since the mid-1990s, so I've been working with them a long time. And when I came to the Langley School District, it was something that I wanted to see extend into Langley. We're here tonight to publicly introduce the concept of the coalition and to introduce our executive. Do you recognize some of the faces there? Behind me is the president. This is Dr. Julie Clayton, and she works with refugee health. She is a clinical counselor in our community and has a long, passionate advocate. She's been a long, passionate advocate for inclusion and equal rights. You know who I am. I think you kind of know. Oh, whoops. Let's go back there again. There you go. I think you kind of know who Wendy is, who's the president of our Langley Teachers Association. We know Rosemary. You might remember Claire Gee. And Jane Burton, who brings a passion for inclusion, Special Olympics, and special needs. And Councillor Rudy Stortebaum. I think I said that right. And he's another key member of our organization. But it's not just us. Over to my left, we've seen Marnie Wright join us for the last, Marnie Wilson, sorry. Sorry, Marnie. Marnie is right, Marnie Wilson. Marnie's just joined us for probably the last four meetings or so, and has been really interested in working with our organization. Gurpreet has been a key member as well, and was critical in getting our last youth forum going at Walnut Grove Secondary. I'm going to turn the next phase of our presentation over to Dr. Julie Clayton, who's going to talk a little bit more about what we're trying to do.
Good evening, everyone, and I do thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight, just to speak about what we are very passionate about in terms of the Human Dignity Coalition. Can I just begin by saying, when you're trying to organize a coalition, you're looking for like-minded people to join you in the fight. And I've worked in community development and social justice most of my life, and I have not met a tighter connection of more like-minded people than this school district in which you are supporting and serving. And so it has been just such a rich privilege to sit at the table with my colleagues and to sense that we are all about bringing down the walls that divide us and identifying the things that we really do have in common, that no child should have to go to school and fear bullying or discrimination by disability or any limitations that are upon them, and that everyone has a voice that should be heard, and that throughout this community of Langley, that the message should be in every corner that human dignity matters. And that's what the coalition is about. And we believe as a united force that we can make a difference in the DNA of this community if we can get people talking about human dignity, and we see evidence of that. So to celebrate some of our successes so far and to give you more information, we have seen two powerful public forums coming together, one in 2016 and one more recently this last fall at Walnut Grove Secondary. And just to get people in the room saying, why does human dignity matter to you? What does human dignity mean to you? And you'll see some of the artwork that has come as we've been working this through. This is a picture of us on Canada Day in Fort Langley, and little children coming and learning about human dignity. And if you see the graphic there, I don't know if I can, oh, I can, I have a spotter there. Yeah. Ah, okay, there we are. Every word on that graphic represents an idea or a thought that someone brought into the room as we got together to talk about why human dignity matters. And it was powerful. And we just want to grow this. And so we have formed the executive planning team. We do have a partnership of approximately 25 community partners and agencies and organizations. We're hoping tonight, by sharing this message with you, you're going to help us grow that. To extend the partnership. We see, we were at Canada Day celebrations, and we have a very specific 2018 strategic plan. Being here tonight is part of our strategic plan. A delegation to the city and to the township, part of our strategic plan, and upcoming forums that we want to have both this spring and in the fall. Here you see the layout of it. We're very deliberate in what we're planning. We see that bringing like-minded people together of varying demographics. We want to have a membership meeting, and it's coming up May the 2nd. I'm not sure where that shows up, somewhere end of April there in the phase 2. And we're hoping that that's going to bring teachers and students and broad representation of people from the community who will be interested in joining us in this fight. And then coming up in October, we have both a youth and adult forum that we're planning for. And we're hoping we're going to pack that room with at least 200 people. And so we're really looking here tonight, hoping that you will help us be a voice in channeling these opportunities. Our goal is to bridge between all of the positive initiatives that actually exist between this school district and the community. And we hope that where the school district is having conversations about diversity, human dignity, and respect, that the coalition could be a network of support to you in this. And so specific items for your consideration. Would you consider tonight the formal recognition of the Human Dignity Coalition as a district committee with a trustee representation affirmed, and that being in the person we would hope of Rosemary Wallace, as Rosemary is already part of our executive, and we would like to see that formalized if that would be meeting with your approval. We would like also to request the assistance of the school district with distribution of coalition information within various communiques that you might have available, and for that also to be endorsed. we would like some public recognition and endorsement of the next general meeting, which is Wednesday, May 2nd. Will be a dinner meeting at Walnut Grove Secondary School, and to have that affirmed and supported by this network would be extremely helpful to us. And to assist in communicating the next forum, which will be October 4th. And any other kind of support that the district can offer in terms of communication, facility, celebration, and support. We do believe that we're living in the kind of days where walls that divide us need to be broken down. You look across the world and you see where those walls are still up and the kind of madness it's creating for our world. And we want to bring wholesomeness, togetherness, and a new sense of community into Langley. And I thank you for your consideration as to how you might be part of this journey with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Bellen and Julie, for the presentation and mostly for the work you're doing. What a great, powerful video, and I hope you can, maybe Barry can get us a link to that. And it's interesting to watch because of the reaction people give, but also interesting because that's only looking at race or genealogy, and you just think of if you overlaid on that some of the other diversities of abilities or challenges and religions and orientations and everything else, and get a sense of just, everybody's family tree, just how diverse we all really are, and how much, the more you think you're different, you're actually more alike. So great presentation and great work, and we'll get your requests on the agenda of the appropriate meetings so that we can respond. So, Trustee Todd?
Thank you for your presentation tonight. I really appreciate it. Did attend February 16th, the workshop, and certainly my heart and my wishes, aspirations, hopes are with you. I especially like your statement of diversity. I've never read something that's as inclusive. We are all ages, youth, young, adults, seniors, all, and all religions, all cultures, all. So that's kind of what we stand for. So I encourage you certainly in your journey, and will do as much as I can to help.
We've had some very powerful youth speakers extend. Wendy's son Liam spoke. He's done a fabulous job when he talked. I'd like to grow up as heartfelt story. Gabrielle Cassette is another. Struggles that he went through. So some of these meetings have been so powerful and so supportive of the initiatives. So it's, it's such a very expansive group because it extends to what we want kids, but it's the adults, and the way to support our kids is to ensure that the adults around this community support. Very grateful for all the support and all the people at the table that have already come out to the meetings, and we do encourage. It's an open door. We definitely do want to see people come. I was at the youth forum and
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Back to you, Mr. Stewart, for the Aboriginal Education Enhancement Agreement.
So at this point, I'll ask a district principal of our Aboriginal programs to Mike Morgan to step forward, and he's going to give an update on the Aboriginal Education Enhancement Agreement. We are certainly fortunate to have Mike's leadership within this department. He's got a great team around him, and we have made some incredible gains over the last number of years, but we also have some incredible work that lies in front of us, and so really appreciate the opportunity tonight to have Mike be able to share where we are to this point in this journey. So over to you, Mike.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me this evening. I'm here to report on the Aboriginal Education Enhancement Agreement and specifically regarding progress on goals. You'll know that we have 2 intertwined goals. I won't be reporting out on strategies that we've implemented in order to reach those goals because this is about reporting on progress. Feel free to ask those questions at the end where you may have about strategies that we've used. Those strategies do show up in our Framework for Enhancing Student Learning report. Our first goal, again, to establish trusting, respectful partnerships between schools, the school district, the Aboriginal community, acknowledging shared responsibility to implement the Aboriginal Education Enhancement Agreement. Our second goal is to work together as a team to create strength-based, personalized, student-centered learning that respects Aboriginal history, cultural values, and nurtures a sense of belonging for the success of all Aboriginal students. These are 2 intertwined goals that can only be achieved through YAYASTL, or working together. And if you'll notice, our very first goal, as it attaches to the Framework for Enhancing Student Learning, it now needs to link to existing local agreements. And our Aboriginal Education Enhancement Agreement links specifically for there. We are obligated to report out on strategies for improving outcomes for Aboriginal learners and our report on progress. And this is where you will see, again, in our superintendent's reports, you will see the strategies and commitments that we have put forward. Our first goal, again, this is our first goal, and underneath our first goal, one of the indicators of success was to increase a district employee's understanding of the historical and present-day context of Aboriginal peoples in Canada. I bring this up as a highlight because we have been incredibly successful along with our partner groups in ensuring that this has happened. This is our start 2 years ago, working together with our QP partners and learning support services when we used the blanket exercise to ensure that all support staff underwent that valuable exercise. Other ways of doing this, we have over 2,000 presentations throughout the year from our Cultural Presenter Program. And our Cultural Presenter Program, if you take some time to look along the side, those are just some of the feedback that we get from teachers as those cultural presenters help teachers begin their journey with teaching Aboriginal worldviews and perspectives. One of the most beautiful parts of our Cultural Presenter Program is that many of our cultural presenters are themselves survivors of Indian residential schools. And they constantly give back to our community, to our students, and to our teachers in this very beautiful way. Also, we've worked on educating our school board office staff. Brad Marsden, who is a world-renowned presenter, came in and did 2 separate workshops for our school district office staff to make sure that everyone here had the same understandings as those understandings that are taking place within the schools and within our programs. And then the community as the teacher, many of you will know exactly where these locations are, but our schools and our departments are beginning to actively reach out to our community and take part in professional development in partnership with Kwantlen First Nation, with Katzie First Nation, with the Lower Fraser Valley Aboriginal Society. We've had over 12 schools attend with their entire staff at Kwantlen First Nation, either for the first salmon ceremony or in partnership with the Kwantlen First Nation at their cultural center to go about learning about Kwantlen's unique history. Another significant step in this is the inclusion of Aboriginal worldviews and perspective department heads and team leaders. This is an example of our schools taking leadership in this regard. Schools have decided to create department heads and team leaders at the middle and secondary level. Again, this is not funding that comes from the Aboriginal program. This funding comes directly from the school budgets itself. So their job is to help all teachers incorporate Aboriginal worldviews into their classes. And what they ask is, they ask teachers to examine their own relationships to Aboriginal people. Difficult questions like, what do I know? How have I come to know it? And how does it influence my practice? and the sign, 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 the sign. Have done a great job of increasing our staff's understanding of the historical context of Aboriginal peoples in Canada. The main idea behind this goal, this first goal, is that we identify all conditions which lead to inequitable outcomes for Aboriginal students. So we are attempting to collaborate to develop a better system for Aboriginal learners to learn within. What you'll see here is a next indicator of success, which we're working very hard on. Schools with an Aboriginal Education Enhancement Agreement implementation plan. So you'll notice there's a framework for enhancing student learning, there's action plans for learning, which each school has, and then there's strategies for Aboriginal students. They need to be embedded directly within each school's plan, and we've been working directly with schools on how do we best do this. This is our next indicator that will really, I believe, begin to take off. What you see on the right-hand side is Deanna Miller, a Catesy Aboriginal support worker. Aboriginal support workers working directly alongside Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal students in a cultural enrichment program. And then she makes a mistake. She asked me not to show too much of that part. A major difference for us this year is the work that we've done along with CUPE and Human Resources in terms of Aboriginal support workers now develop and deliver in collaboration with their schools enhanced service planning. So here you'll see an example of an enhanced service work plan, again working alongside schools, working together. At the same time that they're supporting Aboriginal students, they are also helping non-Aboriginal teachers and non-Aboriginal students gain a deeper understanding of the historical and present context of Aboriginal peoples in Canada. The final indicator that I'll show you in this regards is that departments would have an Aboriginal Education Enhancement Agreement implementation plan. And instructional services, most specifically careers and the district support team have worked together with the Aboriginal program to come up with goals. And we continue to work together. That perhaps will have the greatest impact on student learning because all students will receive these lessons. Learning support services, we're currently collaborating with learning support services for them to develop their Aboriginal Education Enhancement Agreement implementation plan. Schools with space for their Aboriginal program, it's important that we have space for the programs to operate in. Despite the challenges, our schools have worked incredibly hard to ensure that spaces do exist for the Aboriginal program within their schools. This moves us on to the second goal, and this goal is focused around support of Aboriginal learners. And these indicators of success may be a little bit difficult for us to look at, but the data is the data, and this is our work that we have cut out for us. One of the measurements we use is grade-to-grade transitions. And this is the percent of students transitioning to grade 12, so the 2014-15 cohort, the 2015-16 cohort, and the 2016-17 cohort. One of our important things to keep in mind is we are working on equitable outcomes. So I'm showing here our progress in blue. What you will see is Aboriginal students transitioning to grade 12, and in red you'll see non-Aboriginal students transitioning to grade 12. In 2014-2015, Aboriginal students actually transitioned at rates higher than their non-Aboriginal counterparts. Until 2016, what we see is that gap between what we would call an equity gap between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal students. And you'll see the same thing existing for males, and significant changes for our Aboriginal female population. This is over the course of the 3 years of the agreement so far. Another large piece of our measurement is the 6-year completion. So 6-year completion is students entering grade 8 6 years later if they receive a Dogwood diploma. The equity gap, what this simply means is the percentage gap between Aboriginal students and non-Aboriginal students. So in 2014-2015, we had an all-time close gap of 9%. And in the years following, that number has gone up significantly to where it sits at today, a 16% gap in completion. Among female students in 2014-2015, we had reached equity for Aboriginal female students with their non-Aboriginal counterparts. Since then, the gap has increased to nearly 18%. And the same thing exists for our male students. However, what you will see is the equity gap has closed a small bit from 20% to about 15%. One of the ways that we measure success is also through attendance. The Tell Them From Me survey is students self-reporting absences or likelihood of truancy. So again, we go back to equitable representations, and what we find is that Aboriginal students are truant more often than their non-Aboriginal counterparts. We also have an indicator that says students experiencing success in their school of choice. And what this looks at is the rate of our students who are Aboriginal and attend schools other than the school they started at in grade 8. We've worked very hard with Assistant Superintendent Mal Gill, as well as schools which we've traditionally deemed as alternative, to really take a look and tackle this problem. The data that we've used in regards to this is leading towards action. We've met several times and continue to meet in regards specifically to Aboriginal achievement at those schools. Another measurement of success that we have is appropriate supports for students in special needs reporting categories. Again, we're looking very closely with learning support services. This past year, we've worked mostly with the school psychologists to look at the process of identification and how things go from that point. Lastly, what I would suggest is we all have a clear roadmap for what success looks like. And many of us have been at this night. And the thing that I love about this picture is what you'll see is support staff, teachers, community members, and parents all together looking at students who have been successful in the school system while maintaining strong ties to their Aboriginal culture. This is the definition of success. This is the definition of success that we can all agree upon, our Aboriginal community, ourselves. And this is the definition of success that we'll look towards as we tackle those really tough questions. How do we change our system to create more equity of opportunity for Aboriginal learners? While at the same time, how do we support those Aboriginal learners through the targeted funding that we currently have? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Trustee Coburn.
Hey, thanks for your report. I just have you had a slide on the equity, and it's way, way, way back. And I have a question about the equity. Just keep going back. Sorry, it said to identify and then to come up with solutions, roughly is what it said. No.
Close.
Yeah, there it is. So identify all conditions which lead to inequitable outcomes and collaborate. And then, so that caught my eye right away because I wanted to know if you have identified, but what I'm really curious, and I think it will answer, one will answer the other, do you know what accounts for that huge drop in the transition rates? So you were looking at in 2014, the rates were quite high, and then there was a huge drop. Were you able to determine what accounted for that drop?
No, and this is when we're collaborating to develop and apply strategies to eliminate those conditions, we're at a point now where we're working with Aboriginal support workers, learning support teachers, but most importantly the schools and those programs. And the data is the data in the past, it's what happened. As we went back and looked at it, we said, we're probably still in the same process of creating a more equitable system, we still need to provide those important supports for Aboriginal learners. So it's very important that while we work on our progress towards truth and reconciliation, that we don't lose sight of supporting Aboriginal learners that currently attend school in our district. So there was no one, this is the reason. We didn't identify any one major factor. No.
So what are off the top of your head, and I understand you might not know, but what are some of the conditions that lead to the inequitable outcomes that you can think of?
There are many, and I would prefer to talk about them as we have a chance to talk about with our partner groups. We've listed many of them, but I think it would be in the best interest of all of us to talk about them as we go through with the department, et cetera, learning support services, instructional services. It's system-wide. What we do know is we do have an inequitable system. How do we create a more equitable system? Working together.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Trustee Dickman.
Thank you. Could you scroll forward to the first data slide on the transitions? There we go. I am wondering, and I know that this might not be something that you can answer right off the top of your head, but if you could, often statistics, when you get a larger body of data, you can have some changing that's unnaturally skewed. So what I'm curious about is, could you let me know now or at some point in the future, through the chair to the superintendent, as there's been, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, we've had more students who have self-identified. We've had a growing body of students who are now comfortable or aware of the identification process. Is the negative decline with the data, has it been correlated against the body of identified students? Do you have the exact mirroring of that data going up as you sometimes see in numbers? I'm just curious if there was a higher rate of identification in concert with transitions.
Not in this particular cohort. So when you look at the 2016-17 cohort, it was one of our lower cohorts of students in numbers, approximately 180. It's grown. Now you're looking at that same cohort with number 220, 230.
So at 2016-17.
So these were the students who entered grade, so that 2016-17 number are the students who were in grade 12 and had started 5 years ago, started grade 8 5 years ago.
And they
so
were
you're
a
looking
smaller
at data.
number.
They were about 180 students, yeah.
2015-16.
Would be about the same. We've only noticed that large growth in 2017, 2018 at the grade 12 level. Most of the students were self-identifying at earlier age groups.
Okay, all right. I was just curious.
Hope that.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing. I was curious if there had been a growth, because sometimes that can explain
There has
numbers.
definitely been a growth, but not at
Not in this
not at grade 12 cohort of those kids.
It'll be interesting to hear what you come back with in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Todd.
Thank you, Principal. I want to say I really appreciate the blanketing exercise, and I got to partake in one with Deepak, and it was a real eye-opener for me, and I believe it's very useful in building awareness, recognition, as we journey through truth and reconciliation. I really appreciate that, and the more you can do, obviously, with staff throughout the district, the better off we all are. The difficult questions. One of them is always around our non-typical students, and oftentimes when it comes to designations like the R and H in terms of the behavior, the moderate and severe behavior, students who are non-compliant end up kind of designated in those areas. And I know that you said that you're collaborating with learning support teachers, and it's just a guess, but I believe oftentimes our First Nations are overrepresented in those designations. How are we working towards a better ending there?
It's a very good question. We're no different than any other district in the province in that students of Aboriginal ancestry are more likely to be identified as having special needs that require behavior interventions as opposed to special needs that require learning and teaching interventions. So what we need to look at is two things. One, are those interventions appropriate that we're providing to those students who are designated? And is the process of designation equitable? Do we have, do the people who are identifying students, are they able to take into account all of the things that are unique about those students? So those are really, really difficult questions that require the community, learning support services, and the Aboriginal program to work together to decide. Again, if you look at the data across the province, we are in the same boat as everyone else, and it's by asking those hard questions. Is this equitable representation? If it isn't, are the interventions that are in place to change those outcomes for those students, are they effective? And we know from looking at the data and from asking the hard questions that currently they are not.
Thank you. A couple questions of my own. First off, on the Dogwood completion rate, the gap, it would be, I don't know whether you can tell me off the top of your head, and fair enough if not, but it would be interesting to know kind of what's behind that. Like, are both groups improving, but at different rates, or is one improving and one getting worse? It would be interesting to kind of get a peek behind that to understand.
Yeah, so for the last several years, the gap was closing. So we had an increase in overall 6-year completion, and our Aboriginal completion, 6-year completion, was going up as well. In the last 3 years, as you can see here, our non-Aboriginal completion stayed steady with a small improvement, and the success of our Aboriginal female students in terms of the 6-year completion. I think what happened is we reached equity in 2014, 2015 with Aboriginal female completion, and reaching is probably a very poor choice of words, because I think obviously there's still work to do as a system, and there's still work to do as schools in an Aboriginal program. So that our male Aboriginal achievement has remained relatively unchanged over the last 3 years. We've experienced a significant increase in the last 10 years in overall completion, especially Aboriginal female, with the exception of these last 2015, 2016, 17. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And it would also be interesting to know in terms of the transition, so the grade 8 to 12 transition, obviously concerning that the numbers are going the wrong direction, not the data isn't telling us what we want to hear, but it is what it is. Would be interesting to know if the students are not completing grade 12, or if it's an issue of timelines. Is it taking them 6 years instead of 5 years, versus are they not getting through grade 12 at all?
Very good question. So that's getting to grade 12, and then completion comes after that. So this is what you would see in the completion. So the grade 12, transition to grade 12 doesn't equal their completion rates. We do keep track of 7, 8, and 9-year completion, but what we find is despite the best efforts, especially of Langley Education Center, who's done tremendous work with the Aboriginal program and with Aboriginal students, despite all of their work, you don't see a significant change from the 6-year completion rate in the 7, 8, and 9-year completion rate.
Well, we'll all be very interested to hear further as you work with the different partners and departments to come up with a plan to improve the results the direction we want to see. So thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, we have one more question. Yes, I did. Trustee McVeigh.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment that when I read the report the other night and reading the results, I felt an overwhelming sense of sadness and frustration, because I know how hard you and your department are working, and the tremendous amount of effort and care and compassion that's going into finding solutions, bridging the gaps, solving the issues around inequity, and it just felt really not right, that the results aren't reflecting the work that you're doing. And so there, I acknowledge you for being accountable for those numbers and putting them out there, as hard as they are to look at. And it's the difficult questions that are coming along with those results. But I encourage you and your department to keep up pursuing what we all want, which is equity and success for our Aboriginal learners. And it's there. It's just a matter of persevering and keeping on. So thank you for what you're doing, and continued good luck, and we look forward to more down the road.
On behalf of our department, I certainly appreciate it. I would like to say the hard work is being done. The hardest work has been talking about working together, the concept of YASTL, and the idea of working together as a system, as a community. So I appreciate your kind words, and the efforts will continue.
Thank you very much. And now, trustees, we need a motion that the Board of Education receive the report on the framework for enhanced student learning, quality learning for information as presented. Moved by Trustee Todd, seconded by Trustee Deckman. Any comments on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that brings us to the information items and the International Student Program tuition change. Mr. Stewart.
Yes, it's an opportunity to make trustees aware that we're looking at putting in an international student fee increase for the 2019-20 year, so not for this coming September, but for the following September, to increase the fees from $13,500 per year to $14,500. Plenty of reasons for that. I mean, costs continue to go up, not only in terms of recruiting, but also in terms of homestay and also I think in terms of trying to make sure that we continue to provide adequate supports for these kids when they're in school. So that does put us in line with Abbotsford and Surrey, our neighboring districts, are doing the same thing for that year. And we are still significantly lower than Metro Vancouver. So so it will not do anything in terms of affecting us in terms of competitively, but it'll certainly help us manage the costs with that program going forward. So.
Thank you, trustees. Could we first get a motion that the Board of Education receives the report on the International Student Program tuition change for information? Moved by Trustee Todd, seconded by Trustee McVeigh. Trustee McVeigh? Just go ahead.
I just wanted to ask briefly, when was the last time we increased our rate? Maybe 2-3 years ago? Would that be about right? So it's probably the 13.5 has been in effect, I think, for about 3 years. So 4 years between increases. Is that about right?
Yeah, it's been at least 3 years, and this would be still another year yet. The reason also that we have to, in terms of your marketing, and you need to give at least a year's notice. In fact, our markets in Europe, as Barry could attest to, they'll be already looking at what the information they're putting out for that year. But you're right, this a little bit, at least 4 years by the time it goes into effect.
Okay, thank you.
So just wanted to add to that. It was $12,500 for the longest time, but we were charging $1,000 for MSP and medical, and then the system changed and we rolled it into the price to make it $13,500. So that happened about 18 months ago, if I believe correctly, but the overall fee to the student was the same, but it's now in one fee instead of two, and now this will be an increase.
Trustee Ross.
Just for the sake of the public here and myself, what does Metro charge for a student to come and study in, say, Vancouver?
I could put an interesting memo for you, but it would be $15,500 and up from there. Right? Yeah, so yeah, $1,000 to $2,000 more easily. So.
Seeing no further speakers, so we've moved and seconded receiving the report. So all in favor? Any opposed? And that brings us to the annual review of the district French programs. Mr. Stewart.
Good, thank you. So I'm going to call on Director of Instruction, Don Thompson. I think you're going to take part in this presentation also, I believe, and a little bit. And District Teacher Ellen Bernowski. One of her portfolios is French programs. And we do this every year around this time, just a chance to reflect on all the opportunities that we kids in this domain and how we're doing, and I look forward to hearing the report. So I'll turn it over to you, Dawn.
Okay. So we're going to cover a few things
In English.
Not in French, yes. So as you can see, the enrollment is trending upwards, and that's in keeping with the overall enrollment trends in the district. And one of the reasons that we're also seeing, I think, is that there's retention at the secondary level. Students continuing to choose French, either core French or French immersion, well, in this case, core French, as an elective option, because from grade 5 to grade 8, it's a required subject, and from grade 9 onwards, it's an elective, and we're waiting on the new graduation requirements and grad program to find out whether that will continue or not. And as we can see for French immersion, we've seen a steady increase, but most recently there's been a decline, and that's due to two factors. Number one would be the situation at Aldergrove Community Secondary, which you may be aware of, and also the fact that at the secondary level, sometimes what happens, and this is a provincial trend and a national trend as well, is that students opt not so much out of French immersion because it limits their elective choices, but in favor of other courses, because in order to meet the requirements for the dual dogwood diploma, they're required to take a certain number of courses in French. And in smaller schools with limited options for the various blocks that students take, they find themselves, if they take French immersion, the French language course, then that eliminates them from taking another elective that might be of interest to them. So it's usually not I'm opting out of French immersion, but rather I'm choosing another elective or another area.
One of the things that we did this year, as you know, the decision was made to cease the program at Aldergrove Secondary, and so Claire Guy had met with parents on February 23rd last year and talked to them and let them know that that decision was happening, and talked to them about the rationale behind it. One of the things that she talked to them about is that we would brainstorm some ideas about how could we give the students that were coming up from Betty Gilbert still a rich language experience. And so Ellen and I met with some of the teachers and the administration at Aldergrove earlier this year and talked about what might that look like, what were the opportunities, knowing that it has to be something that's sustainable as well. So we actually talked about the idea of having a French honors program at the grade 10 level, grade 10 and 11 level, and that would be open to all students that are taking French. So if you were doing really well, just French as a second in the core French program, that you could go into that program as well. And one of the reasons for that, what we did this year is we moved some of the French immersion kids up to write the advanced placement exam. So we've put that out there, and of course parents also know that they do have another option. Grade 8, they're generally quite full, and then there's some attrition, so some seats open up at grade 9. So we're playing all of this out, keeping lots of options on the table, and also looking to see what the parents of students at Betty Gilbert are going to do. The principal of Aldergrove Secondary had a meeting with the parents recently, and many of them were talking
French is an area that receives targeted funding from the federal government under a 5-year funding protocol that is actually due to expire June the 30th. And districts around the province, and in fact provinces across the country, are waiting anxiously for an announcement about what the next funding is going to look like, because that's the money that we use to support staffing, resources, and all kinds of other exciting things that we do for students in helping them. K-9 curriculum, and grade 10 is on board to be started for next year, and then we're still waiting for the grade 11 and 12 piece. The ministry is piloting a new literacy exam that will replace the French language Fral 12 equivalent of the provincial exam for English 12, and they've opted to push that back for a year so that they're not. Language French to communicate with one another about experiences that are important and relevant and meaningful to themselves. Teachers have also been looking at Aboriginal language resources. Of local First Nations materials available in French for teachers to use. So we have some work and some collaboration to do there in the resource creation. And after the meal that students and parent volunteers had prepared, she had them performing a traditional folk dance in French. So that was very exciting for everybody because the integration of the culture is a really, really important way for students to learn the language. And there's a quote that we particularly liked. And there seem to be two trends in the national conversation for French. Number one would be that French immersion is for all students. It's meant to be inclusive. It's previously, historically been viewed as a very elitist program for the academically challenged students, but so many Canadian parents have benefited themselves from French immersion, and so many parents are understanding that it's really important for their children to have the same opportunities, and so they're working really hard to make sure that their children have those same opportunities. And so we're working very closely with schools and administrators to make sure that we can have the appropriate supports for students in our French immersion programs. And then the other national trend is toward your identity as a bilingual Canadian. So being Canadian is also being able to speak French and be bilingual. So the quote that I really, really liked was, it's not just I'm learning French, but I'm learning in French. And that was particularly resonating. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Trustees, let's start with a motion that the Board of Education receives the annual review of the district French programs for information. Moved by Trustee Todd, seconded Trustee Degman. Trustee Todd?
Hi, thank you, Chair. C'est une présentation formidable. Okay,
Merci,
so
monsieur.
it was a good presentation. Thank you. I did read the report, and full disclosure, I am a parent of a French immersion student. So very interested in this field, and it's an excellent thing. It's an excellent program. I'm surprised our numbers actually dip, but I do understand that there's a reason for it, and it's kind of the uncertainty fueling over at Aldergrove. In Aldergrove, to maintain some kind of robust French, and this is, again, maybe a difficult question, but French honors is typically more of an academic thing, and oftentimes immersion students need continued practice in their language skills, their oral skills, and I'm just wondering if we've thought about maybe trying to be innovative and doing things a little differently, have language labs or something where they can do it sounds different, but online French speaking or something, so they don't rust out with their oral skills that are really critical when it comes to, their late school, formal grade school things. So just one area.
Yeah, absolutely. And the important thing to remember is that our instruction, whether it's core French or for French immersion, really espouses a philosophy of balanced literacy. So it's not just the grammar worksheets and memorizing the lists of vocabulary that many of us enjoyed during our careers as French students, but rather a varied approach. And so we have all these resources that are now available to us, Skype conversations, so that students do listen and speak and read and write in balance, so that the oral skills, which are just as important as the written skills, are included as well. And so we'll work closely with and get information from other schools that are offering the honors program. I've been in contact with Yale Secondary in Abbotsford, and I've had some excellent discussions and information from their languages department head and the teachers who teach there. And so we'll certainly look very closely at seeing, making sure that we can replicate best practices for our students here in Langley.
Trustee McVeigh.
Thank you for the presentation, and full disclosure, my kids were French immersion kids, so I have a soft spot for this program, and it stood them in really good stead. They've served them well, so I appreciate that. Back in the day, we promoted French immersion programs through preschools and parent meetings and things like that, and I noticed on the slide and in the report that there was reference to a parent meeting. So how are we getting our message out about French immersion? What a great opportunity it is, that it's not an elite program, that you don't have to be gifted to attend, which my kids were not, but how are we promoting it so that it becomes and is able to be maintained as a robust program?
Well, it's really interesting because French immersion continues to be a really, really popular program of choice. So popular, in fact, that we still haven't maintained an existing wait list for parents interested in enrolling their children in early French immersion here at the board office before we look at the applications for the online process. And we would love to be able to expand the program because, as we all know, it's very important and also extremely popular. But we're limited by two things. Number one, the French immersion programs are housed in dual-track schools, so we don't have any more classroom space to put the students in the additional classes. And number two, we have some staffing challenges. And the staffing challenges, as we're all aware, are not just unique to Langley, but they're, you know, sort of systemic across Canada as well. And so jurisdictions across the country are looking at really creative ways to solve that problem and source really quality teachers. Someone suggested that, well, we could just go to France and bring teachers, you know, from France to Canada, which, you know, sort of sounds at face value like it might be really a great option. But the French school system and the British Columbia school systems are very, very different. And so we want to make sure that we have the right people, because language instruction isn't just about speaking the language.
Thank you. Trustee Todd? You are.
So another question I had, and this was more about the resources. As you say, we're recognizing Indigenous worldviews and perspectives, and I know how difficult it is to source really reliable French resources, but then French resources that are written with this emerging perspective. I mean, it's not really emerging, it's been here forever, but it's emerging in terms of actually a lot of the French texts are written from a settler perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, there's a lot of French language First Nations literature that has to that is Cree or Anishinaabe from Quebec or from Ontario, and so teachers are able to use that as a comparative literature or compare and contrast kind of activity. So the unit on legends might be, let's compare and contrast local First Nations with, you know, existing things, or from your. It's always based on, you know, your community, you know, and how that you know, how you find your place in the world. And we'll have to look at, and in the absence of other resources, then we'll have to look, you know, sort of within the Metro Vancouver region, look at what we can do to support that as well. And again, there are lots of people with really great ideas and very creative ways to solve the problems. We just need to find the time to make that happen.
It's definitely a journey.
Okay, so trustees, we've moved and seconded receiving the report. So all those in favor? Any opposed? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And that brings us to the Secretary Treasurer's report and the information items. Mr. Isley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to provide an update on our financial results year to date. What we have is the date up to the end of February this year. With the spring break, staff is still working on the March results, and we'll be updating the board at the finance facilities on the March results. To the end of February, the district is in a $2.5 million deficit, which if you look at comparing to last year, we were only at $1.3 million deficit. A large portion of that is the fact that we have the student learning grant. That was a one-time fund from last year that was any amounts not spent had to be spent this fiscal year, which was added into our amended budget, which we approved in the February board meeting. So there's a $500,000 in learning grant funds spent year to date on a budget of $947,000. I think a better representation is if you look at the net revenues and expenses this year at 1.4 versus $800,000, and if you take out the $500,000, that explains most of the $600,000 difference year to date between those two amounts, and then a large difference in the capital portion, which I'll cover off later. If you look at the top there at the revenue, we are at $118.5 million, which is 60.2% of our budget, which is very comparable to last year when we were at 60.1, and at $112.7 million. The growth there is in our international funds, and then also due to higher enrollments in students from our ministry grants. Wanted to point out that as we go through the salary portion of these specifically, we have a mixture of 10 and 12 month employees. So 10-month employees, we would be expecting to see about 60% of the budget spent, and for 12-month employees, about 66.7%. And then for our support staff and a few other areas, there's a combination of 12 and 10 months, which would be in the middle of those two, or in that range, so as we go through that. Our benefits are right in line at 59.2%. If you compare that to 59.9 last year, they're trending well. The budgeted percentage of salaries this year was 24.3 compared to 23.9 due to costs and benefits, but we are seeing a bit of a reduction in that this year as we had the MSP changes for a couple months, which is going to cost us next year, now that they have this lovely payroll tax, which we're still trying to get some clarity as to if there's any funding from that from the ministry, but right now we're on our own for that and haven't heard anything about that. Our education assistants, you would expect them to be in the range of 60%. We're trending at 58.8, which is slightly higher than last year's 57.6, but it's a trend that we've seen year over year of being below budget in this area due to the vacancies in those positions. Those vacancies are usually filled with term positions or casuals, which show up under our substitute lines instead of under the salaries for those categories. Our other professionals, expected to be at about 66.7%. They're actually at 66.4 versus last year at 69.2, so we're trending in the right direction for them this year. A little lower than last year. There was a payroll reclass that happened between last year between principals and other professionals, which skewed that 69.2% a little bit, and so that'll be corrected in March last year, so you'll see that change upcoming. Principals and VPs should be at 66.7. They're right in line at 65.8 and respectively 65.3% last year. Our substitutes are really close to last year, both in dollars and in percentage, with the 70.5% spent versus 70.1% last year. I guess the concern there for me ongoing is that the budget is reflective of the fact that we haven't been able to supply all the TTOCs due to the teacher shortage. So that number, when you look at it as a percentage of our total compensation, is lower this year. It's budgeted lower, but is a concern ongoing as we right-size the staffing pool. Those costs will increase next year, will increase pressures in other areas. Support staff, you would expect to be 60 to 67.5%. They're right in line at 62.5 versus 60.7. Teachers would be expected to be in the 60% range. Right now, they're at 58.7 and 58.3. That's another trend that we've seen over the last couple of years, where we've seen the lower average teacher cost due to the higher number of retirements and lower levels of new teachers lower level of salaries, of teachers that are coming in to replace them. And we've had high levels of retirements over the last couple of years that we've benefited from. Part of that benefit is now in the supplies category, because we've taken some of our one-time savings on vacancies and some of those average teacher costs and put them into our supply numbers. As you can see, that we're $2.2 million more than we were this year versus last year. And but as a budget, we're in line at 64.3 versus 63.6%. Some of the other things that are in that supply number, obviously the student learning grant, which was mentioned earlier at the $500,000. We've got portable costs that we've put in there. We have international student medical costs, which we referenced during the ISP, which was before a revenue in and it was an in and out, and we now have expenses for it. So that's a change. And then with the higher enrollment in ISP, we also have higher commission costs. Part of the savings that we've experienced in the late starts and those various things, we've also been able to add some funds into the capital lines. You can see that we're at $1.1 million versus our $2.2 million. in budget. A lot of that was infrastructure that we approved when we did the amended budget in February. A lot of that is for buying portables and a bunch of furniture that we've done as one-time items to use some of these one-time cost savings as one-time purchasing items to do some of the things that are needed in our schools. And you can see that that is a sizable increase in capital funding and budgeted and spent when you compare it to the amounts that we had planned last year. Last thing I wanted to show you was to do the trend line of our surplus deficit compared to the prior years. This graph has been adjusted from the numbers you've seen in the previous slide, as I've taken the student learning grant out of the amounts for last year and this year so that we have a consistent apples to apples comparison trend line. As you can see, the lighter blue line at the bottom there is trending in line with the previous years, where it starts in a larger deficit as it climbs up as our funding and our expenses start to align better. That is my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Risley. Trustee Dyckman.
Thank you. My question relates to the reference made to the MSP payroll tax. Do you have any projections? I didn't see it in the report as to what the impact of that to the district when it's implemented would be, how much we would be looking at the cost incurred to the district.
The projections for next year is about a $1.2 million delta from what we're paying this year.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Ross.
So there's always concerns, things that don't show up that you haven't spoken of. What are the concerns that are looming ahead of us or keep you awake at night?
There's lots of things that keep me awake at night. But as far as the finances, I think for this year, we're in good shape. I guess my possible concern would be the fact that with a lot of the one-time savings that we've had this year and some of the surplus money that we've used, we've put a lot of funds out into the system, some of it targeted for portables and for furniture and innovation grants and those kind of things. But schools also have a lot more in their supply budgets because of staffing, late starts, and availability of staff, that when we have to put that back to what that is normally, it could be uncomfortable for people and feeling that there's a bit of a hit in the system when it's not really a hit in the system. It's a one-time buffer.
If I could ask a supplementary question, and you didn't cover off on it, so you might not be able to respond to it, but if you could just briefly give us an update on our building projects, if you're able to, appreciate it.
In what regard, sorry?
Well, are we on track? Are we happy with them? Is there some pretty big projects? Driven by, they look great, but...
RC Garnett is just waiting for the final occupancy. There is all done and the stuff is moved into it, so they could be moving in any day. The high school on the Willoughby Slope is trending towards September opening like it was intended of 2019. And LSS, or Langley Secondary, is progressing well and is on time.
Okay, can we have a motion that the Board of Education receive the Secretary Treasurer's information item report as presented, moved by Trustee Dyckman, seconded by Trustee Todd. Other questions, comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? And that brings us to any new business items, which I don't believe we have any of. And so on to Trustee Comments. Trustee Coburn. Trustee Ross. Trustee Wallace.
Thank you. I just want to put a plug in for the Langley Environmental Hero Awards to Mark Warwa on 2018. Awards open. The deadline is this month, the 20th, April 20th. And so that's for youth, business, or organization. So if you know anybody deserving of an environmental hero award, please, you can go on to, I guess, just Google Langley Environmental Hero Awards 2018 and you can download the form. So just putting that out there to people. Thank you.
Trustee Todd. Trustee McVeigh. Trustee Dyckman.
I just wanted to mention there are a few more musicals coming up in the next month or so from our schools in the district, including Fine Arts Peter Pan and several other ones, Walnut Grove Show. If you're looking for a really enjoyable night out that is not going to break the bank, then I urge you to check out some of the shows. They are always so well put together, super entertaining, and they are a great night out.
Thank you, Trustee Degman. So that brings us to question period. Everybody in the room knows the rules, so I won't repeat them. Do we have any questions for items on the agenda tonight?
Packed house.
Seeing none? Seeing none, can we have a motion to adjourn? Trustee Coburn, seconded Trustee Ross. All those in favor? Thank you very much.
It's not turning off when I do that.
I just have to hold it.